Hi everyone, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today on John's Briefs, back again with Tim Forshee, defense attorney extraordinaire, judge pro tem, former prosecutor, Arizona Ranger. Gosh, you got a resume, bro.
I'm just always bored, apparently.
Yeah, gotta just stack some more stuff up. And we recently had a video on the channel of a rideshare driver. I'm not sure which company he was rideshare driving for, but rideshare driver who got attacked by two dudes with a gun.
Nightmare.
And I wanted to talk to the attorney here about carrying against company policy. Firearms Legal Protection is who I trust to help me after a use of force incident. If you're a Firearms Legal Protection member, you can attend our monthly Active Self-Protection training seminars for free. Check out all they offer to their members at the link below. So I'm going to start here with a little story.
Okay.
So I started carrying a firearm in 2006. And the reason I started carrying in 2006 is I was running a video game store while I was going to grad school. And we sold video games. And when the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 came out, managers were getting hurt for them, killed for them even.
There's a first-person shooter pun coming in here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was like, nah, man, not me. So at the time, Arizona was shall issue. We're now constitutional carry, but shall issue then. I went down and got a permit. I bought the wrong gun. I put the wrong ammo in it in the wrong holster and carried it as a lucky rabbit's foot. It took me a while to gain some clue.
Thank gosh it was lucky.
And one of the things I did is I looked through my employee manual of the company that I was working for that wasn't the big corporate one. We were a small franchisee. And my corporate policy said nothing. And so I said nothing. And I just shut my mouth. And then eventually my district manager was like, hey dude, what are you doing about all these things? And I'm like, well, I'm carrying a gun. What do you think I'm doing? And he was like, you do? And I was like, yeah. And he said, all right, I don't care, whatever. So it was really no big deal for me. Did get to be a little bit bigger deal when I started teaching on a college campus here in Arizona. It wasn't a public college campus, a private college. That ended up being okay. But this can be tricky stuff.
Very tricky stuff, yeah. Yeah, and it's easy for people to tell you, what, just ignore the rules and carry the gun anyway because we want you to be safe. The problem with that is that I own my own law firm. I'm self-employed, have been for over, I think, a decade and a half now. And at some point, you have to realize that not everybody has that luxury, right?
It's real easy to say when you don't have to pay the consequences.
Exactly, and you've got to remember that that's not the case for a lot of people, right? So I know a lot of people work in the health industry. I'm sure in most states, certainly here in Arizona, zero tolerance, gun-free campus for every medical facility that I'm aware of, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm a nurse and I'm 115 pounds soaking wet and I have access to the pharmaceutical locker and my patients know that and they tell their scumbag friends and suddenly I'm the object of a lot of attention for people that I don't want attention from, saying that I can't be armed on my way to or from work or at work is a real issue, right? So Arizona recognized this back in 2011. It used to be that if your boss found out that you had a firearm in your vehicle, in the employee parking lot, they could discharge you for cause if that was against their policies. That is now not legal. That's now an illegal firing, just like firing somebody based on race or gender choice or anything like that. And the theory is that you have a greater right to the firearm in your personal vehicle to protect you on your way to and from work than they do on the asphalt underneath the tires of your car in the parking lot. So I think that's a good law change. But of course, that always begs the question for me. I think people that don't look at this the right way, I know you do, is how did your boss find out there was a gun in your car? The whole thing here is about concealment. I mean, do people pat you down at your work? Do people make you walk through a magnetometer at your work? If so, you've got an issue. Right now we have to deal with it. If nobody pats you down, if nobody searches your purse, searches your desk, you don't have to walk through a metal detector, then I'm not really sure why it's anybody's business what you've got in your pocket, whether it's a pocket knife or a multi-tool or a firearm. I mean, make sure it's concealed. And then I know we've talked about this before, Johnny, but how do you define concealed? Because a lot of people define concealed as, I can't see the gun.
Covered.
That is not concealed.
Yeah.
Concealed is no one knows you're carrying a gun. I mean, I think I've told you the story before. I smelled Hoppy's number 9 on a guy one time when I was standing in line in the store behind him. I could smell his gun, exactly. It's a beautiful, nostalgic smell, but when there's some guy standing in front of you that looks like he's not the kind of guy you want to invite for dinner, you sort of ask yourself, oh, I believe I know that smell. That's not a concealed weapon. I know that's an extreme example, but that's not a concealed weapon. If no one knows you're carrying a gun, it is impossible to get in trouble because of your gun. And that's what I think a lot of people just fail to grasp. It's a very simple concept, but make certain that no one knows you're armed. So it kind of always gets back to the whole legal, right, safe.
Yeah.
And they're not all three the same thing.
They're really not. And of course, in most states, right? So I don't want to generalize. Some states have different laws, but in most states, we're not talking about a legal issue here. You know what I mean? That if you're on private property that's not a statutorily prohibited private property, you're not going to face legal sanctions or criminal sanctions.
Worst case scenario, some really extreme situation could be trespass, and that'd be it. Yeah.
So that's worst. But of course, if you violate the company handbook, well, then you can be discharged. You can be fired from your job. And I always tell folks, look, I never would tell somebody to carry and violate the law.
Right.
I'd certainly never do that on video. I'd certainly never do that in a public place. But people ask me that stuff in the comments. Well, John, should I carry in my children's school even though it's against the law?
Right.
Like, I'm going to tell you yes.
Well, that's what everybody was mad at me when we were talking about the AR pistol braces solutions, and I was telling them, well, here's what you need. Well, you're part of the problem. You're as bad as the government. Look, I'm a lawyer. You think I'm going to tell you to break the law?
Stupid, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, that makes me liable for that. I'm not going to do that. But also then I think that, you know, when you look at your company, if that company policy is serious, then you got to deal with that issue and go, wait a minute, if I lose my job, can we survive that?
Right.
Can I find another one? Is this going to haunt me for a long time?
Is it a job or a career?
Right.
If it's a career, you could lose your licensure. I mean, there's bigger ramifications for some folks than others.
And if the balance of your risk benefit analysis is that it's not worth carrying, well then don't carry.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
If you've got good security at your place of work, there's armed security, that you have to have keypad entry, et cetera, you know, it's probably a relatively low risk. So nobody's ever 100% safe, but that's probably a low risk. So you're right, is the risk of getting fired and losing your career much, much, much greater than the risk of somebody gaining entry and you needing your firearm?
Well, and I can't tell you the number of times. I had kids in public school. I don't anymore, but I did for a long time. And the number of times we went to football games and I begrudgingly left my firearm at home because I didn't want to go to prison for carrying a gun on school campus in Arizona, which we need to change that law. Arizona legislature,
Please.
Are you hearing me? But the fact of the matter is I did it because I didn't want to go to prison.
And of course the risk there is that with schools especially, I mean, you're just a pariah. I mean, it'll be front page news tomorrow, lead story on the Channel 12 News, blah, blah, blah.
Especially when I was pastoring. Holy cow.
Yeah, oh my gosh, right?
So company policies at that thing though, and I'll say on the other side, I recently had a friend who texted me like, hey man, I need a little advice. Okay, so we have a no carry policy at my job. I'm pro Second Amendment, and I saw, you know, my friend who is a decent guy and all these things, and I saw the fact that he had some clips on his belt, and I saw, you know, I am reasonably certain he's carrying a firearm. What should I do? And I'm like, well, who made you the policy police?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I might nudge your friend and go, hey friend, I'm not saying that, you know, there's a company,
underwear showing.
Yeah, I'm not saying maybe you ought to pay attention to making sure that you're not flaunting company policy. Yeah. But there is such a thing as not my circus and not my monkeys. Yeah. And
if it's a buddy and he's got the old small back holster and his jacket's caught and you can see the gun, it's kind of like a lady coming out of the restroom and she's got her dress tucked into her pantyhose. Yeah. Maybe that's somebody you mentioned it to. Well,
and I mean, so that's kind of my thing. I'm not the morality police. I'm not the company policy police.
But here's the thing. There's somebody that works there that is.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
For sure. Yeah. And also I think that, you know, straight up, if it was somebody that I was like, that guy's got a major anger problem.
Yeah, right.
That guy's, I know for a fact, that guy's got a huge substance abuse problem.
Yep.
Well, first of all, hopefully I'd be saying something to the company about the substance abuse problem. But that depends on trust. So listen, you're not worrying about legal stuff here. We're worrying about, again, that idea of legal, moral, and right.
I always think there's one quick little anecdote I want to share with you that I've only had this happen once, but I had a company that was actually owned and operated by a very pro 2A guy, very pro gun guy. He met me through classes or competitions or something like that. And he came to me and he was setting up a relatively small business, I think maybe like 20 to 30 employees. And he wanted me to draw up the employment manual for him. And he wanted me to require all employees to carry guns.
Terrible idea.
And of course you'd think if you're pro 2A, gosh, what could be better than that? Horrible idea.
Terrible
I tried
idea.
to explain to him why it was a horrible idea. It's every bit as bad of an idea as banning guns, if not worse. And I did talk him out of that, but I thought that was really interesting that the rebound effect here is not equal. It's sometimes worse, I think.
No.
So, you do not want to require that. That's scary stuff.
I always say people have the right to keep and bear arms. Some people should not.
Man, I say that almost every class I teach.
Yeah, and if you shouldn't have a gun, then don't have a gun.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
You have a right to keep and bear a chainsaw too, but it doesn't mean you should stop at Home Depot and buy one and take it in the backyard and start using it. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So listen, do your own risk analysis here, right? Is it a big enough deal that you're going to lose your career, your licensure, your job? You know, you've got to do that math. If you go, no, but I need to carry, then
if I'm turning my back on strangers in a confined space 15, 20 times a night, there ain't no way I'm not carrying a gun. I'll tell
Right.
you that. I mean, that's just too high risk. In fact, you pointed out in the video, if the guy in the front seat had been armed,
Oh, he couldn't have got it.
unless he had his gun under a newspaper on the front seat, or it's of course liable to slide off if he hits the brakes. I mean, there's all kinds of problems with the situation. But if he'd had a gun in a small of the back or a 4 o'clock position or even an appendix, I mean, before he knew what was going on, there was a gun pointed at his head. A
Yeah.
Croatian gun, as
So-
I recall from the video. So
Yes, a Croat pistol. I saw that, and I didn't mention it.
I know you
because,
didn't, but I thought if I just said country of origin, we'd
I was just hoping that maybe it would malfunction, that it wouldn't function correctly. But listen, in that case, for the Uber guys and gals, the rideshare drivers, not just Uber, but all the other ones, fighting in contained spaces,
stuff.
those stuff of some snuggle struggles, murder yoga, jujitsu, that's where you got to start.
Did you notice that the guy immediately behind the driver, it looked to me like he grabbed the seatbelt and pulled it
Yeah,
tight.
and pulled it
I mean,
tight.
These guys had done this before. They knew
Yeah.
what they were doing. And if somebody pulls your seatbelt tight like that and the guy on the other side's got a gun, you are pretty much, the fight's over at this point. Now you got to pray.
And I get it. People got to make a living. And so they go, hey, I'm a rideshare driver. I'm doing Uber or Lyft or one of the other ones, whatever. And I got to do that to live. Oh, I get it. And I'm not going to shame you for doing that. I got to say it's a dangerous
It is.
profession.
It really
And
is.
I would only do it if you had a very high skill set and recognize the risk you take and maybe keep looking for somewhere else that you can maybe make the same amount of money or better and without the risk.
Yep.
Tim, appreciate the knowledge, man.
As always, buddy. Thanks.